Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later, we're going to talk about recalling our governor. Is it even possible? But first, oil and gas development in Colorado and around the nation from the Western Energy Alliance. Kathleen, Sgamma. I did pretty well with that. A good Italian name. Tell me about the Western Energy Alliance.
So Western Energy Alliance represents oil and natural gas producers in the Rocky Mountain West. So companies in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, etc.
So you're having a great time in Colorado in the last couple of years, fighting off fracking bans and now seeing your industry slowly get strangled.
That's true in Colorado, but on the plus side for Western Energy Alliance, it makes federal lands in Wyoming and Utah look a lot better than they used to.
Really? All right, so let me talk about federal lands, because you drill, I'm going to say drill, which is shorthand for what you do, but you poke holes in the ground in all sorts of areas. Some areas people own, farmers, ranchers, and some places the government owns. What are those places?
So there are about 700 million acres of what's called the federal mineral estate. And that's lands like Bureau of Land Management lands, Forest Service lands, and some of those federal minerals are beneath private landowners' lands as well. Those are still federal minerals. But throughout the West, because we have predominant federal lands in the West, about 35% in Colorado, as high as 70% in Utah, 50% or so in Wyoming. There's almost no area in the West where, if you're trying to develop oil and natural gas, you're not going to touch some federal minerals. You either are on appropriate non-park, non-wilderness lands, or you're going to be somewhere where you're going to hit some of those federal minerals underground.
So if you're drilling in somebody's farm, all right, he's a cattle rancher, he's got a large spread of land, you have to come up with an arrangement with him, assuming he's got the mineral rights, and you come up with a deal, and he gets something. Either a royalty or a flat fee or whatever you guys negotiate.
Royalties, yeah.
Right? So when you go on government-owned land, federal land, who do you pay and how much is it and how do you figure it out? Or is there no payment at all? You just go willy-nilly destroying the world.
Well, nothing is willy-nilly. So in order to develop on federal lands, you need to get a lease from the federal government in the first place, and then go through all types of environmental analysis and study before you can develop on federal lands. If you get to the point where you can develop on federal lands and you're actually delivering and producing, then you're paying a 12.5% royalty revenue back to the federal government.
How does that compare with what you're paying usually on the private sector if you're drilling on somebody's farmland?
Well, individual deals are worked out with the farmers
so
if they
all
own
over
the
place. Okay.
That's right.
So where does that money go? So you're giving them 12.5% royalties, the government, on whatever you extract. In Colorado, we call it severance taxes as well. So the state gets a lot of money when you sever things from the ground. What does the government do with this money?
Well, about 40% of it goes to the Bureau of Reclamation, which cleans up old mining sites. And the rest...
Wait, stop there for a second.
Okay.
I'm curious about this part. So out of that 12%, 5 cents or something goes to the government to clean up past messes, basically. Old mines that weren't closed up properly.
That's right.
Even though you had nothing to do with those mines.
That's
and you don't do mining.
No, we don't do mining. Right.
That's where they get the money to clean those things up.
That's right.
Where does the rest go?
The rest goes into the general treasury. So, about from the 12.5% royalties, about half is split with the state. So if we develop in Wyoming, Wyoming gets half of that royalty. And the federal government gets the rest. Of the federal government's portion, a good chunk of it goes to the Bureau of Reclamation. The rest basically goes into the general treasury.
Just spend it on whatever the feds... So whatever program you hate the most, you can blame on oil and gas. If you don't like the wars and the defense funds, you can say, oil and gas money shouldn't go to it.
Well, then you could blame yourself first, though, because your income tax is a larger portion.
All right.
But then there's offshore royalty revenue from oil and natural gas, which goes to the Land and Water Conservation Fund. I think that's something that people don't really know.
I don't even know this. Help me out.
The Land and Water Conservation Fund is used for conserving national parks, public lands, acquiring public lands, and that comes exclusively from offshore oil and gas development.
Okay. So the reason we're talking is that your organization is trying to raise a little money to help a national park. And you're going through a crowdfunding website that we have something to do with at Independence Institute called Freedom5, freedomfy.com. And you've got a little campaign, and by the way, the site's kind of like GoFundMe, but and you're trying to raise just a few $1,000s to help rehab a path in Canyonlands National Park. Why would an evil oil organization give a damn about a national park? You guys hate this stuff.
Well, actually, we're all Westerners, and we recreate on public lands and national parks just like everybody else. We hunt and fish and hike and backpack. So we live here, we protect our
environment. You mean you actually like the outdoors?
Yeah, we're all outdoorsmen and women, and we operate in an environmentally responsible manner so that we can protect the places where we develop. But we don't develop in national parks, we don't develop in wilderness areas. But we're doing this campaign to do two things. Raise awareness for great groups like Friends of Canyonlands and Friends of Arches and Canyonlands, who is the nonprofit that the funds will directly go to, and they'll use it for things like the Mesa Arch Trail and repairing that and other maintenance projects at Canyonlands. But it's also really to raise awareness for the Restore Our Parks bills in Congress, which would take a portion of the funding, up to $1.3 billion every year, that oil and natural gas provides back to the government.
Let me kick some of that back to you, make sure I'm following you. One, you don't do any development on national parks.
That's right.
All right, they are off limits.
That's right.
That doesn't happen. So if somebody hears you're destroying our national parks, you don't touch them. You're not allowed to touch them. They're left alone.
Right.
But you do. I'm always amazed by the stereotype of certain people who hate the environment or hate the wilderness. The more I learn about hunters, and I'm not really a hunter, is that they just want to destroy the wildlife. And the more I know real hunters, the more I realize they are so in tune with the outdoors and having healthy livestock and healthy wildlife there. I mean, they're zealots about keeping the wildlife there. And for those of you who extract minerals or oil and gas, the image is you don't care about the outdoors. And whenever you try to convince anybody that you do, they're not going to believe you. Why should they believe you?
Well, they don't have to believe me.
That's true.
But I do know that people get more mad at me when I'm pointing out all the things we do to protect the environment than any other time. Like when I point out things like how we're reducing the footprint by up to 70% through horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. We're reducing our footprint on the land. We're reducing habitat fragmentation. We're reducing air emissions. The more I bring up how we operate in an environmentally safe manner, the more they get mad at me because they want to propagate a narrative that oil and natural gas development is bad. Well, there is impact, but we mitigate and we minimize that impact on the land. And ultimately, we're providing the funding that actually helps protect public lands like national parks. And we could do more if this Restore Our Parks bill passes.
And what is the Restore Our bills? Let me kick it back. So the idea is right now that your money, your tax money, goes piling into the general fund. You're saying, well, take some of that and point it directly to the outdoors.
That's right. There's about a $12 billion maintenance backlog on national parks. That means, we love our national parks as Americans, right? We visit them, we hike in them, trails are crumbling, roads are crumbling, bridges, because Congress simply doesn't provide enough funding to do all those maintenance projects. So we're just raising awareness for that bill that would direct up to $1.3 billion every year towards that $12 billion backlog.
So you know what I'm going to say, which is, how stupid do you think we are? This is obviously just some PR trick to make your nasty, evil oil companies look better to the public. We're not buying it. It's simply a PR stunt.
Well, it is a PR stunt to raise awareness of this bill. Because, when we try to develop on public lands, there is a faction of the environmental lobby, well, pretty much all the environmental lobby that says, no, we can't do any development because public lands are too precious. Well, yes, there are very precious all public lands are precious, but they're not all national parks. There are hundreds of millions of acres of working landscapes across the West that are public lands that are used for ranching and mining and energy development. And those are designated appropriately through public land use planning processes where people get a chance to weigh in on that. And so certain areas are absolutely designated as off limits. But some areas are appropriate for development or ranching, and that's where revenue is generated for the benefit of the American people. I think what sometimes people forget is that we all own the energy that's under public lands. And so we develop that in an environmentally responsible manner on behalf of the American people and return to them a fair royalty.
Real quick question. There's a whole group of people that are getting more, I don't know how to put it, crazed about this. That not only do they not want coal, they don't want oil, they don't want gas, they don't want hydroelectric, they don't want nuclear, they don't want energy. And I'm trying to understand what exactly is it that they want and why they hate poor people so much.
Well, they want us to all live in caves, apparently, or maybe die off so that there aren't as many of us using energy. But those of us in the real world want to provide energy that enables people to heat their homes and cool them in the summer and go to work and school and, do all the things that make our lives meaningful and safe and healthy, which when you use about 80% of the energy worldwide comes from coal, oil, and natural gas. So until there's an alternative that's actually reliable, 24/7, that can provide all of our energy needs, wind and solar cannot do that. They can provide a small portion of our electricity, but not all of our energy needs. Until we have a viable alternative that does everything that oil, natural gas, and coal do, then we have to find a balance. And that balance is developing it in an environmentally responsible manner and using it appropriately.
When I was a kid, the idea that America could be energy independent was science fiction.
Crazy.
Science fiction. And it could never happen. This is why we had to do all the crazy stuff we did in the 70s and try to do all the new technologies because we were beholden to the oil interests. We are now energy independent and exporting more oil and natural gas than we bring in. Because of these technologies that are saving us from doing more coal, saving us from burning down forests. It is amazing what has happened in the last 50 years. I don't want to see it turn back. And I also want to make sure that people understand the people who are doing this, they love the land too. They really do. All right, people want to get involved in this. Where do they go? Where do they learn more about you and the organization?
Well, they can learn about Western Energy Alliance at westernenergyalliance.org, and they'll be able to find the crowdfunding campaign or the Freedom Fi campaign from our site or from your site as well.
Go to freedomfi.com, and you'll see it there. My God, could you imagine people who actually are not ashamed of oil and gas helping national parks? I think it's fabulous.
And the campaign is called Parks in Rec.
Parks in Rec.
That's
with
right.
a W, Rec.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay tuned.